This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. Happy New Year, everyone. It is 6.5 minutes past midnight, January the 1st, 2015. To everyone around the world, a very happy New Year. May you all have health, happiness, love, spirituality, and prosperity in this year. That is from myself, Laura, our family, and our rel-mar McConnell Media family to each and every one of you. My guest this hour, the first guest of 2015, is Dr. John E. Brandenburg. He has a Ph.D. in plasma physics, and he's a plasma physicist at the Orbital Technologies in Madison, Wisconsin. He's working on space plasma technologies and space propulsion. He also performed research on the MET, which is Microwave Electrothermal Plasma Thruster for space propulsion, rocket plume regolith instructions on the Moon and Mars, vortex theory of rocket engine design, and Klein theory of field unification for purposes of space propulsion. John is here to talk to us about something I found fascinating. I found it startling, shocking, unbelievable, but it's true. John, before we get into the crux of the interview, first of all, I want to thank you so much for joining us on New Year's Day, and to you and your family and all your associates and students, a very happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
John, take us to Mars. Tell us what Mars is like.
Well, Mars is a cold desert. It's sort of like a desert in Antarctica. Mm-hmm. It's very cold there. It only gets half the sunlight as the Earth. So every day on Mars, even on a summer, is more like a winter day, like we'd be used to on Earth. And I've been studying Mars for a long time now. It's been since 1984 when I began the study of Mars in earnest. I was the first person to propose a paleocean on Mars. In fact, Wikipedia finally gave me credit. After all these years, I've been he who must not be sighted on Mars. Because of reasons I'll discuss with you, Rob. Basically, the discovery of the ocean on Mars grew out of the investigations of Cydonia Mensa and the face on Mars, the pyramid, and the other artifacts found there. And we were studying that in 1984. And I was working at a nuclear weapons lab at the time. We were working on directed energy weapons as part of the Reagan Star Wars defense initiative. And I was studying Mars, and I had a book about Mars in my hand in the library, and there was a fellow standing in line. In those days, everybody lined up at the Xerox machine, and it was it was getting near dusk because it's time for everybody to go home, and I was just trying to Xerox some interesting articles, and one of them was that Mars' atmosphere had a lot of xenon-129 in it, which is an isotope of xenon that's found on Earth in equal amounts of xenon-132, but on Mars it's very abundant. It's 2.5 times more than the xenon-132, and that's very unusual in the solar system. And this scientist looked at this. I mentioned this to the scientist just standing in line, and he said, "Could I see that?" And he looked at it and he says, "Oh, someone nuked them." And then he suddenly looked at me and realized we were in an unclassified area, and he suddenly gave me that look like, "Oh dear, I've just said something classified." And then he just set down the book he was going to Xerox and excused himself. And this would have happened occasionally when we started having a discussion about some scientific thing, and we're speaking out of school, so to speak. We were saying things that we shouldn't really actually be saying in an unclassified area. And he was apparently involved in atmospheric monitoring, which was a big activity at Sandia Labs. So I got a chill when he said that, because Mars looks like a very devastated planet. It looks like a planet that used to be much richer in life and richer in life environments, river channels flowing out of craters, etc., an ocean bed. And to have somebody tell me that in the middle of the Cold War was really quite frightening. And I shared it with my associates in the investigation group we had called the Independent Mars Investigation. And all of them were really quite stunned by this. However, at the time, I did not know why he would say that. It took many years of research later to find out, studying the open literature, why he would say that. And so that stuck with me from the very beginning when we were looking at what looked like a dead civilization on Mars, and then somebody says, "Oh, the isotopes in the atmosphere are from a massive nuclear war."
John, stand by. You and I have to take our break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Exonation, Dr. John Brandenburg is my special guest. We're talking about evidence of massive thermonuclear explosions in Mars past, the Sidonian hypothesis, and Fermi's paradox for the next 2 hours with Dr. John Brandenburg. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Nita Hickok is an expert in exorcisms, psychic warfare, soul healing, angelology, soul retrieval, demonology, energy healing, long-distance healing, astral healing, and much more. Nita is an interfaith minister because she believes all gods and goddesses are valid and that they are part of one divine force that is incomprehensible to us who are incarnated upon this earth. Nita has been doing astral healing, distant healing, spirit release, exorcism, house cleansing and blessings, soul restoring and revival, psychic vampire removal and curse removal, and much more for over 40 years. For more information or to contact Nita Hickok, visit her website at www.astralhealer.com. That's www.astralhealer.com.
Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464. Exonation, Dr. John Brandenburg is our special guest this hour. He doesn't have a website, but here's his email address, spaceranger137@yahoo.com. And if you'd like to read the complete article by Dr. John Brandenburg that was published in the Journal of Cosmology, 2014, Volume 24, Number 13, it's available free of charge at www.wikipublishinghouse.com or www.rel-mar.com/2014 1229. You know, when you first sent me this information, John, it was shortly before, I guess, was the middle of December, and you and I talked for length on the telephone, and I got the information you sent me. Evidence of massive thermonuclear explosions in Mars past the Sidonian hypothesis and Fermi's paradox. The first thing that came to mind was all the people who have talked in the past about the face on Mars, the pyramids, and then I started thinking, well, why is it so important that we go back to Mars if, in fact, Mars is this desolate planet? What are we going to accomplish? What are we trying to prove? Are we trying to prove that we are capable of space exploration, or is there another reason for wanting to go to Mars that we're not being told about? So tell me how your investigation that I guess we can say originated from a line going to a Xerox machine.
Right.
How did you start investigating this unbelievable information that you had heard from this scientist who you realized just spilt the beans on something he shouldn't have?
Right. His reaction was just a very spontaneous, like, oh, I know what that means. The Xenon 129. I know what that means. It means Mars. Somebody nuked Mars, and I don't think he was familiar with the Mars data at all. I think he was just talking about what he had found on Earth, and some years later, I discovered that the same Xenon 129 excess. It's normally roughly equal to the Xenon 132, is found in a component in the Earth's atmosphere that has appeared since 1945. And anyone can look this up. It's in the book called Mars by editor Kiefer. It's published in about 1991. And they have a whole table of atmospheric values of Mars and Earth for Xenon components, and it's written there, published in the open literature, that this Xenon 129 is associated with nuclear weapons programs on Earth, the testing of nuclear weapons and also the manufacture of plutonium in fast neutron reactors. So it's the thing that prompted me to investigate was partly the urging of Vince DiPietro, because as I learned more, and my education included just basic principles of nuclear weapons, because I went to school at a nuclear weapons lab. We were studying controlled fusion using laser fusion, which is a miniature hydrogen bomb. So we were kind of briefed basically on how nuclear weapons worked and how we were trying to make a miniature one. And so, but as I learned more about Mars and also the data began to accumulate, I learned that the Russians reported a large amount of thorium and radioactive potassium and uranium. These are all radioactive elements on Mars' surface. And then when we got, of course, Mars meteorites, we found out that Mars had less of all of those elements than the surface values indicated. And the surface values were read by gamma ray detectors orbiting Mars. The planet Mars has just a thin atmosphere. The gamma rays shine right through it from the surface. So you're reading the composition of the top few inches of the Martian soil. That's got plenty of uranium, thorium, and radioactive potassium in it. But then we get the Mars rocks, which are apparently from the several feet below the surface, blown here by big meteorites crashing into Mars. They have much less uranium, thorium, and potassium than Earth rocks. So the surface of Mars appears as covered by a radioactive layer. And when I found that out, and then saw that the Earth's atmosphere had the Xenon 129 due to nuclear testing, I thought, oh, now I know why the guy reacted the way he did. And so I began a full investigation using all of the scientific training I had. And we were also waiting, in fact, for new pictures of Cydonia and other areas of Mars that we'd investigated. And so a whole avalanche of new data came in, especially gamma ray maps of the Martian surface, and they revealed a very large radioactive scar on Mars near Cydonia Mensa, in a place called near Acidalium, or Acidasia planitia, it's also called, the plain of Acidalium. And so things just started suddenly the data all started coming together. And I also realized, and I stress this in the book, it's almost as if the U.S. government knew this stuff was there and was just publishing all the data out in the open. And in fact, when we discovered finally that there seemed to be no doubt there was large nuclear explosions on Mars, the first place we reported it was one of the intelligence agencies in the United States, which we had worked with closely on other projects. Mm-hmm. And so we reported it to them, and they took it very seriously. And then 6 months later, they just got back to us and said, as usual, they gave our answer to our question in terms of a question itself. They said, "Why don't you publish this stuff?" Meaning we don't consider it classified. Go ahead and publish. And then I realized, the U.S. government wants this to come out. It basically wants this to come out, and so out it goes. I finally written a book putting it all together. For a while, in fact, I thought that we could explain it as natural nuclear reactors, which happened on Earth in rich uranium deposits in Africa. At 24 different spots, groundwater got into rich uranium deposits and made its own little nuclear reactors using water moderator. And then I thought, okay, suppose there was a large one on Mars and it exploded. But just like Sherlock Holmes, sitting there thinking, but the dog didn't bark. And in this case, the fact that the dog didn't bark was the fact that the facts did not line up with a natural nuclear reactor. The xenon-129 is a symptom of fast neutrons, as in a nuclear explosion. It's not produced by any natural nuclear reactor, or a regular nuclear reactor doesn't produce hardly any xenon-129. And the other thing is it didn't leave a big crater, as a natural nuclear reactor in the ground would have to be. These were explosions in midair, and they were fast neutron events. And that means, finally, like Sherlock Holmes says, finally, when you've eliminated all the impossible options, the one option that is left, however improbable, must be the truth, and that is these were not natural explosions at all. They were airbursts, like at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that don't leave craters. They did that to intensify the shock waves, by the way. And they went off in midair. They were very violent. They would have torn off the entire atmosphere of Mars. In fact, there's evidence the shock waves from the main explosion went all the way around the planet, collided with itself on the far side, and left a pile of debris there, what's called the antipode, the exact opposite spot on the other side of the globe from the explosion. So these are just horrendous events. And just down, if you look at the two hot spots, the hot spot in Acidalium and then the hot spot in what's called Utopia Planum, and follow the winds, they go directly to Cydonia Mensa and directly to a place called Galaxis Chaos, where artifacts are found. In fact, another face on Mars is at Galaxis Chaos, and that's published in the article.
Is it possible, John, that these thermonuclear explosions were actually created by some unknown, as of yet, natural phenomenon that occurs on Mars, I should say?
Rob, as you can imagine, I looked at just about every conceivable mechanism that could create such a thing. But no, I know of, there is no known natural phenomenon other than there is no natural phenomenon known that can explain this. This is just the universe is a violent place, But whatever happened on Mars would have had to have affected the whole solar system, and yet there's no evidence that anything was solar system-wide happened that would create this xenon-129 imbalance, for one thing.
But as we've had, as you discussed earlier, that there were these natural reactors that exploded on Earth, is it possible at one time in the history of Mars that the situation on Mars was much different than it is right now, and that it could have happened, thus giving you the evidence that you found?
Well, Rob, that's a very good question. And like I said, I had to basically do a detective story. I had to figure out, okay, suppose it was a natural nuclear reactor.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I liked that hypothesis so much, I almost started believing it myself, rather than believe, the alternative,
right,
which is quite dreadful. And but that would have, of necessity, left a large crater. You cannot release that much energy. It's like setting off plastic explosive. If you set it off an inch away from a steel girder, it doesn't really bother it. But if you put it right on the surface of the steel girder, of course, it breaks it in half, because the explosive force, the shock waves actually penetrate more deeply into where the resistance is the most to it. And so it would have been on Mars. It would have naturally dug into the ground. It created an enormous crater.
All right, John, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. If you'd like to contact Dr. Brandenburg, his email is spaceranger137@yahoo.com. And we're talking about evidence of evidence of massive thermonuclear explosions in Mars past, the Cydonia hypothesis, and Fermi's paradox. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away. What if someone told you you could live to be 120? Would you believe him? What if he told you the Bible guaranteed it? All you needed to do was follow his rules and buy his products. Would you do it? What if you invested 20 years of your life in him? What if he tested his substances on your child? What if your child became brain damaged as a result? Meet Dr. Tyler Belknap, a fast-talking Texas admin turned health guru. At the helm of a vast health food and supplement empire, he has established himself as the authority on nutrition and longevity. But what his followers don't know is that his products are laced with bizarre psychoactive substances from genetically modified plants developed in his very own secret lab. No wonder his customers can't stop using them. Tyler Belknap will stop at nothing to keep his edge in the market, even if it means experimenting on children. Chasing 120, a story of food, faith, fraud, and the pursuit of longevity, a novel from the pen of political cartoonist Monty Wolverton, is an easy and entertaining read full of rich characters and intrigue. It hits home in a world filled with all kind of hucksterism and offers a glimpse of what can happen when GMO technology falls into the wrong hands. Chasing 120 by Monty Wolverton. Get your copy today at www.ptm.org/120 or on Amazon.com. Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahir O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at kahiraodonnell.com or Amazon.com. Exonation, Dr. John Brandenburg is our special guest this hour. There'll be his email address is spaceranger137 at yahoo.com. We're talking about a paper that appeared in, it was in the Journal of Cosmology in 2014, volume 24, number 13. It's available in its entirety at wikipublishinghouse.com or rel-mar.com/2014-1229. All right, John, let's talk about the significance of craters. Now, I understand that if it was a blast that was underground caused by a natural reactor that exploded, based on what we know about the physics of Earth, we believe that it must have been an airburst thermonuclear explosion like those in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah,
how long ago are we talking about?
Well, this happened a long time ago, probably 500 million to 250 million years ago. There was barely any life that we would recognize as life. In fact, we're talking even before the dinosaurs were on Earth. So this was a long time ago.
Is it possible, then, because of how long ago it was, that through some process or another, that if there were craters, that they could have been filled in?
Well, that's always a possibility. However, close to the places where these things occurred, there are some very large craters that date from about the same period as the explosion, in geologic time, and they look fine. They look they're barely filled in at all.
Really?
The kind of energy releases we're talking about is the equivalent of like a 10-mile across asteroid piling into Mars, and we have a crater that called Leo Impact Basin on Mars, and it's 200 miles across. 200 kilometers. And so we're talking just stupefying levels of destruction when when energies of this magnitude are released on a planetary surface. It makes a big crater, and you cannot sweep it under any rug. I mean, the rug is gone, Rob. There's no rug to sweep it under. And so it's we looked at the possibility that that the ground was turned to lava and just all flowed back together again, but no, we did research into the cratering process, and this is roughly it is what it is. There's just, you look at the sites. The only thing that is at the sites and that was recently found is melt glass. At both sites, there is what is a peculiar form of volcanic. It's a glass, a melt glass, and it's very similar to what's formed in nuclear explosions on Earth, and it covers both areas on Mars where these radiation hotspots are. And then the glass itself, they could tell from spectroscopy, is covered with the residue from being etched with nitric acid. And nitric acid is also formed in large amounts in nuclear explosions in the atmosphere. So it looks like everything lines up for two very large nuclear explosions in midair.
Tell me, John, where did you get the evidence from Mars that you were able to subject these samples to the different testings to come up with the conclusions that you're basing your hypothesis on?
Oh, well, the evidence is from Mars meteorites, and also from the published data from the Mars probes, and it's basically openly available data. And I go to scientific conferences and see the latest data from the Mars meteorites. One of the Mars meteorites, several of the Mars meteorites also show that they were exposed to high energy neutrons. like in a nuclear reactor. And so this, when I saw that, it was the thing that kind of pushed me to the conclusion that, for one thing, that I had to investigate further. And the fact that some of the meteorites, the younger Mars meteorites, appear to have been exposed to a tremendous flux of high-energy neutrons. And that's not something you would expect in a Mars meteorite. Mars has an atmosphere that's thick enough to protect it from neutrons, from outer space, from cosmic rays. So it's a very bizarre kind of thing to encounter. As a scientist, I'm used to trying to explain things in terms of very much accepted phenomenon. You know, you always look for there's a principle called the economy of hypothesis. You know, you just say, let's try and explain this with as few new things as possible. And now suddenly we are face to face, literally, with a universe that supports intelligent life. And sometimes this life does terrible things because people have asked me, why do you even connect this to like Cydonia and Galaxious Chaos, the two sites on Mars where there are artifacts? And I said, because I can read a map. I said, I know where the winds blow on Mars. The fallout from these two explosions goes directly to those two sites. And so they have to, people do not drop big hydrogen bombs on Mars for no reason. They don't, they're not doing it for entertainment or even for testing. They were apparently targeting somebody.
No disrespect meant to John.
Sure.
But you're saying, and this is a quote, analysis of recent Mars isotopic, gamma ray, and other imaging data supports the hypothesis, which in my interpretation supports the belief that perhaps two immense thermonuclear explosions occurred on Mars. What you're saying is it is a possibility that this happened. Nowhere from the information that I saw, that I've been able to read so far, is it stated without a doubt that there were massive thermonuclear explosions in Mars.
Well, let me put it this way, Rob. If we send rovers to Mars, or if we send a probe to Mars that picks up some Mars rock from these areas and brings it back to Earth, I know people from little places I used to work who can tell you in 1 hour if it was a nuclear explosion or not. They can look at the isotopic patterns in the rock, and they will be able to tell you with absolute certainty what happened. As it is, as a scientist, I cannot consider this proven yet. It is a hypothesis, but at the same time, so many of the facts of Mars are explained by this peculiar hypothesis that I consider it, in my own mind, I'm almost 100% certain. In fact, I would not have published it unless I felt 100% certain, simply because it's such a strange hypothesis and it's rather ghastly.
Do other members of the scientific community support your hypothesis?
I've had privately many people tell me that.
I mean on the record.
Oh, on the record. Well, when I published the natural nuclear reactors on Mars, several people commented that this was quite interesting and possibly true. Since I said, oh, well, maybe this wasn't a natural nuclear reactor, maybe this was a nuclear weapon, I don't think anyone has stepped forward and said, I think Brandenburg's hypothesis is correct. It will take some time. I also believe, though, that in various nuclear labs, people are actually looking at all the evidence right now.
If, in fact, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, John,
Absolutely.
If, in fact, there were massive thermonuclear explosions in the past on Mars, why are we spending so much money in time, in technology, in manpower to get to Mars? What are we trying to accomplish if this is a nuclear wasted planet?
As I point out in the article and in the talk that I gave at the American Physical Society meeting in Monmouth, Illinois, recently, I believe that it is now imperative that we send people to Mars to maximize our knowledge of what happened there. They will have to look at the sites, get samples, analyze them. They will also have to figure out, were these nuclear weapons targeting someone? If so, is the Cydonia and Galaxius areas, are they actually archaeological areas, as the pictures appear to indicate?
But there's a lot of controversy surrounding those pictures as well.
Oh, of course. People will claim, well, that was all put to bed in 1998 when they took the first picture of the Cydonia Mensa. And what they did is they took it at an oblique. They took a picture at an oblique angle, and they displayed it without any contrast enhancement. So when we got the picture and actually figured out the viewing geometry, that wasn't from above, it was from the side, almost from a profile, and looked at it, then we saw all these new details. That apparently was let's say, a scientist pulling a fast one. They knew the public was craving to see the new image. They showed them a very substandard image and said, "See, there's nothing." So they've debunked nothing. The Jet Propulsion Lab that I've dealt with for a long time. What you must understand is there are tensions within the U.S. space program between manned space flight and robotic space flight.
Right.
And these have always existed. There's always been a school of thought that says the humans shouldn't go anywhere. We should stay home and in our mommy's basement and look at the stuff streaming on the internet. In fact, they will tell you that it's much better to visit Paris on the internet than actually to go there.
Well,
then there's another school of thought that says we haven't actually gone any place until we stand there and pick up some rocks.
But let's look at the U.S. space race. The Russians landed on the moon before the Americans using a robotic craft.
Oh well, we had landed as surveyors. They weren't rovers. But yes, the Russians did land a little rover and drove around.
The Russians basically said, "Hey, all right, we've been to the moon, nothing there, so why should we pay any attention to it?" And they're basically doing the same thing with Mars. So what do they know that we don't know, and why are we still so hell-bent on going to Mars?
Well, the Russians tried very hard to get to the moon. They had an enormous rocket called the N1. You can actually look on YouTube and see all these videos of it blowing up. It blew up 3 times in a row. The last time was just a week before the Americans landed on Mars. The cosmonauts, and my goodness, these people were brave. They were ready to charge off to the moon and try and make one landing without any testing of their equipment or anything to see if they could beat us to the moon. And their rocket blew up on the launch pad. They were actually going to rendezvous with the moon stuff in orbit and then go to the moon. So they weren't on the actual rocket. They were going to ride a different rocket. But this was extremely important to the Russians to try and beat us to the moon, and then they failed. And then they, of course, said, "Oh, it was kind of the sour grapes thing. Well, there's nothing on the moon anyway."
So what did we actually accomplish by going to the moon? I mean, besides,
we showed.
All right, but when you look at all the money that was spent, when you look at the big picture, what the hell was it for? Was it just to claim, all right, the United States landed on the moon, look at us, woohoo? Was that all it was?
Well, we're not speaking Russian, Rob.
No, but there's in my way of thinking, there has to be more to it than that.
Well, I believe that human destiny is out in the stars. That we're supposed to go out and meet the people who I do not believe we're alone in the universe. I believe that our future is to join a community of peoples in the cosmos. I really believe that. In fact, other people believe it too. Why do you think they put a map on the Voyager with a picture of a man and a woman standing there with no clothes on?
It's the what if factor. What if we aren't alone? What if there is life out there? What if one day in the future? That's what it's all about.
Yes.
Because I still can't understand, John, and I've got to take my break in about a minute. I still can't understand what the entire meaning of going to the moon was. All right, it was a great accomplishment for mankind, just not for the Americans, but for the human race. It was a great accomplishment.
Just like Yuri Gagarin's first flight to space was a great accomplishment.
But that was so many years ago, and nothing's happened to the moon since. And yet you've got India, you have China, and you have Japan plotting out the moon right now with 3 satellites, surveying it. The United States isn't up there doing it, which brings it to the...
Oh, no, we have a very powerful satellite orbiting the moon now called the LRO. And if you... I'll talk to you about this after the break.
All right, we'll be right back on the other side of this break with Dr. John Brandenburg. If you'd like to send John an email, his email is spaceranger137@yahoo.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back after this break. Don't go away. Hi, this is Rob McConnell, just letting you know that the X Chronicles newspaper is now available online at www.xzonebookclub.com. All past editions and current editions of the X Chronicles newspaper are available for 99 cents. That's www.xzonebookclub.com, and that's 99 cents U.S. per edition. And don't forget, the X Zone store is now open as well for all of your X Zone Nation merchandise. www.thexzonestore.com. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Dr. John Brandenburg is our guest. His email address is spaceranger137@yahoo.com. John, I understand there's a helium element found on the moon in vast quantities that would be a great help to the energy crunch here on this planet. And this is another reason why China, Japan, and India are so interested in mapping out the moon and so on. If the Americans are doing the same thing, that's great. If this is going to help mankind, why don't all the countries work together on this like we do on the International Space Station?
Yes. Well, you might ask, why do they have hockey games when everyone should just ice skate together?
But we're
the
not.
Joy of competition, and it's part of the nature of the human race that they have rivalries.
But that makes no sense because, when you look at the International Space Station, you don't have rivalry there. You have people working together from different countries.
Oh, the International Space Station is a very good example of international cooperation towards a very good thing. It's our first permanent space colony. And the Russians, even though there have been various crises of the Russians, things like that, we all still keep plodding along up there on the space station. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets along pretty much. I hear there have been a few tense moments over the dinner table during various crises, but by and large, it's a very successful. It's a United Nations in space, and Canada is very much a partner in that. And I propose that any mission to Mars be basically the International Space Station Consortium going to Mars, and it must be an international thing. At conferences, I have tried to make sure that my Russian colleagues are very aware of what I found on Mars. Just because I don't want to give the impression that we Americans are trying to hide anything from anybody about something as important as this possibly is. If there is a dead civilization on Mars, as apparently there is, I'm very, very certain, absolutely certain of this. And if it was destroyed by two large nuclear weapons, as I am absolutely certain it was, then this is really kind of a crisis situation once people decide that this is true. And I urge other scientists to investigate the data that I have published, see if it's really true. And if it is, they should contact their government officials and urge that an international mission to Mars involving like the Space Station Consortium be mounted immediately.
Why?
To maximize knowledge. Once you have people on the ground, you have all those different eyes. It's very restrictive having just a probe land. If you have people there, people digging through the ruins.
Yeah, but what, John? We've got to take our break for this hour in about a minute. But
sure.
But why do we need to go to a dead planet to find out how it died, or if there were really thermonuclear explosions there? Especially since they happened how many millions of years ago?
500 million years ago.
So what's the big deal?
Well, we have to find out if something like that can still happen.
Well, don't you think if that technology was around, that we would have evidence of it happening much sooner than 500 million years ago? And does something that happens 500 million years ago really reflect on what is going on today on this planet?
These are good questions, Rob.
Let's talk about them when we come back from this break.
We'll talk about them when
Dr. John Brandenburg is my guest next hour as well. And we'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue with my very special guest this hour, Dr. John Brandenburg, you can send him an email to spaceranger137 at yahoo.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Happy New Year, everyone.